to walk in a promise. Abraham fell to his face and laughed out loud, laughed until he was out of breath, even as he stayed low and face down in an ancient position of reverence. He laughed. So often when we tell the story of this family and their relationship with God, we talk about Sarah's laugh, her laugh in the face of divine impossibility. Her son Isaac was named for her laughter. But Abraham laughed too. He was 75 years old and still going by the name Abram, when God first promised him children and a land on which to thrive. To his credit, he believed God at that first promise and mostly did what God asked him to do over the next 25 years. Abram usually trusted God when God made a promise, but he and Sarai were well past the years that most people conceive, and they had no children. He was worried that one of his slaves would be an heir, but God confirmed the promise. Abram and Sarai would have descendants as numerous as the stars in the sky, and God said they would have a land for their home. They do try to get around the promise. Uncertain that it would happen, Sarai convinces Abram to conceive with her slave Hagar. It is not all clear that Hagar wanted to be a part of this arrangement. Abram could have said no, but he didn't. Hagar had a son, Ishmael. God took care of her and the child when Sarai and Abram wouldn't. God would eventually find them a home in the wilderness, but this child, Ishmael, would not be the promised child. This is where we come to our reading today, where God makes one more promise of children and the land, and Abram and Sarai do not yet have a son together. They've been following God's promise for nearly 25 years. God sees potential in this family and assures them a richer future is in store for them. Abram hears this promise and believes, but he laughs out loud anyways. It's been 25 years. There has been so many moves, even a war. He has a son, even if it's not with his wife Sarai. But he will do what God says, but he has to laugh. He no longer has any sense of how long this promise will take to manifest. You remember Noah. He had a covenant made too. God placed a rainbow in the sky as a reminder that he would never destroy the earth again. It was a promise, though, to all creation, not just one particular family. God's covenant with Abram is different. While God will remain the God of the world, this part of the story is about a particular promise to this family and their descendants. While Abram and Sarai didn't do anything to gain God's favor at the beginning of the story, once they decided to follow God and believe in the covenant, Sarai had a child, and his name was Isaac. Soon after, God would ask something of them. This is a portion of the story in the moment where God set forth the explanation for their side of the covenant. They would have to do something to demonstrate their faith. First, God would change their names to Abraham and Sarah. A name change in the Bible often signifies a new or changing relationship with God. There is a second sign that is not part of our reading. God tests Abraham by asking him to sacrifice Isaac, the child they waited for so long. Abraham offers, but God provides a substitute at the last minute and showers blessings on Abraham for not refusing. Remember the rainbow God gave Noah and his family, a symbol in the sky after a flood, as a reminder that God is a God of promise? Noah trusted God, and Abraham trusted God, and the covenant God had promised. These symbols and names remind God's people to walk with God and to trust God's promises. This is the season of Lent. It is a time for telling stories of God's promises, even in the midst of that which is challenging in human life. In a time for remembering all the ways that God calls to us, as God called to Noah and to Abraham and Sarah, inviting into both new life and greater responsibility. Our faith is richer for remembering these promises and discerning new ways to live them out. Maybe we'll find ourselves praying and laughing at the same time, completely unclear how God will make a way with us. But we have to have faith and choose to trust God's will. He knows where He's taking you. Just trust Him.